Good evening, everyone. My name is Caroline Bowman, and I am the acting director at Cooper-Hewitt National Design Museum. And first and foremost, welcome to the Cooper-Hewitt Design Center. We actually opened this space just over a year ago because we're under a massive and transformative renovation at our main campus at 2 East 91st Street. Excuse me. And I'm very proud to say that the neighborhood has really embraced us, and we just welcomed our 14,000th visitor, plus the 70 of you, so 14,070. Speaking of our renovation, I can't help but share some pictures with you because we're so excited about the project, the progress, and what it will deliver for Cooper-Hewitt. 60% more gallery space, better circulation of public and back-of-house space, and a whole new visitor experience, unique to the nation's design museum. We're restoring every millimeter of the mansion, much of which has not been touched since Andrew Carnegie built it at the turn of the 20th century. We're working with 6 fantastic design teams, and I'm proud to say that 2/3 of them are actually National Design Award winners. This picture was taken just 2 days ago, and this is steel being delivered for our future elevator, which will be an expanded elevator which will allow us to finally have massive examples of design be brought up to our new third-floor spaces. I look forward to welcoming you to the new Cooper-Hewitt in the fall of 2014, but until then, seeing you often here at the Cooper-Hewitt Design Center. Over the next few months, we will welcome designers, architects, artists, and other practitioners whose work affects the local community as part of the new Harlem Focus series, curated and led by John Reddick, architectural consultant and Harlem historian. These talks are a way to highlight design issues in Harlem, ranging from public art and landscape architecture to rooftop farms and urban woodland restoration. The next talk is coming up on Wednesday, June 12th, and features photographer Albert Verserka of Esto Photographics. And coming up on June 26th, John Reddick talks with curators and gardeners from the Central Park Conservancy. Be sure to check out our website, cooper-hewitt.org, for more detail. Tonight's conversation with Mack Scogin and Merrill Elam is part of the ongoing design talks, sponsored by Adobe, promoting dialogue about current issues in design, and a chance for us to highlight some great practitioners working in various fields of design today. Past participants in the series include Robert Wang of Google, Chad Hurley, co-founder of YouTube, and many other luminaries. Tonight, Mack and Merrill will present, focusing on their recent work on the U.S. Federal Courthouse in Austin, Texas, followed by a conversation with me and artist Clifford Ross and Judge Andrew Austin, both of whom collaborated on the project, and then we'll conclude with questions from you. Here are Mack and Merrill, receiving the 2012 National Design Award. They have worked together in architecture for over 40 years. Founded in 1984, their Atlanta-based firm, Mack Scogin Merrill Elam Architects, has won international acclaim for work that ranges from a sleek factory for Herman Miller to the Lulu Chow Wang campus center for Wellesley College and commercial office space for Tishman Speyer Properties. The firm's diverse body of work is uniquely characterized by profound rigor, tempered by childlike innocence. The work has been recognized with numerous awards, including the 2011 Arnold Bruner Memorial Prize in Architecture and the 1995 Academy Award in Architecture, both from the American Academy of Arts and Letters, and has been shown at many museums such as MoMA and the Walker Art Center. Mack is the Kojima Professor in Practice at the Harvard University Graduate School of Design, where he served as chairman from 1990 to 1995. Merrill has taught in a number of architecture programs, including the Geary International Visiting Chair in Architectural Design at the University of Toronto and the William Henry Bishop Visiting Professor of Architectural Design at Yale. Here is Merrill at the Cooper-Hewitt's Teen Fair last year, which takes place every year, both in New York City and DC, where designers in all industries inspire high school students about a career in design. Please join me in welcoming Mack and Merrill.
It's just me right now. The subject of the series of talks this year has been about collaboration, and we're going to talk about collaboration, but I wanted to start out talking about collaboration in the spirit, what I would call the spirit of a genteel provocation, around what we see as a very critical issue for architects today, and that is the role of authorship in a collaborative effort. I'm going to outline that subject with a background of a series of slides of our project, and then take a look at a video that we produced that is about one of the most admired collaborators of our time for us, for Merrill and myself. And then lastly, Clifford Ross and Judge Austin. That's pretty imposing, right? Look at that. Both of them. 10 years dealing with these two guys. No, they're fantastic, and we will join them in a more detailed discussion of our courthouse. So let me see if I'm going to go through this pretty quickly. Architecture is an extraordinarily generous and very, very slow discipline. We believe most great architecture is born of and thrives within the realm of the paradoxical, where the contradictory and seemingly ambiguous bring focus to architecture as a fact of culture. Architecture requires collaboration, yet arguably demands individual authorship as a sustaining principle of the discipline, a paradox now made increasingly difficult for architects to address within an ever-changing context of social complexities, the blurring of disciplinary boundaries, and lightning-fast exchanges of knowledge and capabilities. We have for many years been dedicated to, yes, it has been over 40 years, frankly, dedicated to and fascinated by the complex collaborative design process in an effort to make an architecture of authorships and engages the human condition in all its messy glory. Our work in architecture has always been a product of the collaborative process. It starts with the collaboration between the two of us and extends as broadly as any given project suggests. It is the only way we have ever worked. Across our portfolio, from single-family houses to industrial, corporate, and commercial structures, to public, institutional, and pro bono projects, even in teaching, we depend on the collaborative effort to inform our way of talking and thinking about architecture. Through this collaborative work over many years, we have evolved a kind of mindset that has served to direct our personal efforts in the maintenance of this elusive legibility of authorship we believe to be so critical to the sustainability of the architectural discipline. So, the following is a brief list of informed, modest proposals, observations, and provocations that we offer in consideration of this type of collaborative search. First and foremost, the collaborative process inherently involves the questioning of origins, a characteristic of architecture we believe to be fundamental to the core of the discipline, one that requires the expansive potential of a collective and open search. Architecture allows for the integrity of difference, the completely incomplete, and the comfort of ambiguity. This is a cultivated confidence. A collaborative process is only possible when the collaborators are truly fascinated by each other's capabilities, what you collectively know and don't know. Creative and intellectual desire is magnetizing. Interdisciplinary trust is fundamental. You have to believe in the language of difference, but be credible enough to question its value. Creating contrast and contradiction is easier in a collaborative effort. Surprise and happenstance come from informal discoveries of the cross-conscious. Collaborative processes take more time. You have to be an exceptional, patient listener. The definition of the difference between a building and architecture is a fragile condition. It must be rigorously defended, yet open enough to the question of its limits. The collaborative effort is at the heart of a humane architecture. It allows for the hand to be legible in the work. To reinforce and give a little bit of definition to this list, we offer the following video. We made this video in response to a question about what is at the core of architecture today. It was a collaborative effort about what we believe was one of the most, if not the most extraordinary collaboration of our time.
Dear Benedetta, thank you for your wonderful letter. I am so pleased you're okay with me writing about your home in Barcelona. I often talk with fond memories about our visit with you and Enrique there many years ago. Whenever someone asks me what my favorite architecture is, I always say your home. I remember it as a place no one else could have possibly designed, a magical place filled with joy, warmth, wonder, and generosity of spirit. I have at once a vivid and faded memory of that evening. Although memory does fade, this fading also has a way of clarifying moments of meaning. What I learned from my visit to your home is that the true measure of an authentic architecture is born of an intensely personal understanding and love for the making of space and things. That authenticity in architecture is not only rare, but almost never celebrated as such, and that its most distinguishing characteristic is an alluring inscrutability of meaning that defines the soul of great architecture. It is this endlessness of provoked feeling and thought that I most love about your home. I remember thinking during our visit that Enrique's and your architectural magic emerges from your questioning of its origins, where you blur the distinctions between old and new, hard and soft, smooth and rough, deep and shallow, big and small, dark and light, the happenstance and the intended. I just couldn't figure out how you were able to bleed metal into wood, make an enormous desk seem as light as a feather, or get into a bed made for giants. I remember a chair that had so much charisma and personality of form and materials that I just wanted to sit on the floor and talk to it all night about its experience, what it had seen and felt, and what its ideas were about the future of sitting. I remember your dining table and chairs that were the perfect size and height for both Enrique and Elias, seemingly impossible, but true. We laughed at how many times we had all shared dinner with Raphael when he insisted we guess the height of the table and chairs, and how this spurned lengthy debates over the rationale of minutiae of differences between each person's opinion, while knowing that there was no way, without a tape measure, to determine who was right. I will never forget Enrique's extraordinary knife collection. I have to admit, at first it was a bit disarming, but when I saw the endearing enthusiasm on his face as he described the beauty of each object, it made me realize they embodied so much of what is at the heart and soul of your architecture. In the knives, there is the uncompromised presence of their utility that is both beneficial and horrific. You knew intuitively their form, materiality, and size had everything to do with this utility. But what I think Enrique saw was not that simple. They were all made with a kind of precise imperfection that could only be achieved by the human hand, a distinct quality that imbued each with a sense of time, place and strength of character. As we passed them around, all the form, materiality, and weight melted into a balanced fit for all our varied hands. Of course, Enrique would love knives. It was nighttime when we were there. There was no natural light. I have no memory of any light sources, but I do remember having a distinct feeling of being suspended in space. I think this feeling had something to do with a complete aura of incompleteness in the space and finishes. It wasn't a dynamic tension. It was more a reassuring feeling that things in a state of flux are lighter and more buoyant, finished but not final. A feeling that let you imagine positive futures. Everything in your home was really big or really small, really heavy or really light, really textured or really smooth. Contrast and contradiction were everywhere. Spatial generosity was pervasive, but then there were so many curious little exploratory diggings on the walls and weird, precious objects everywhere that you couldn't help but pick up. There were odd surfaces and pieces of things only somewhat familiar. The furniture was too big until you realized it came apart or moved or could be reconfigured to fit or even transformed for another use. I remember thinking there was no paint, only all natural materials, but still there was the perception of a place filled with color and textural richness. I don't remember any windows, no dark holes, but wasn't there a kind of vertical garden off the dining area? Perhaps you and Enrique were born with an intuitive ability to design and make everything the wrong size, out of the wrong material, for the wrong use, and to know that when a human shows up, suddenly everything is right for everybody, no matter what their shape or size. Or perhaps you have endless conversations about the exact dimensions of things and how the resonance of their relational differences serve to warp scale perception. My guess is both. For years I thought the secret to the beauty of your home is the fact that it is scratched out of and molded into a pre-existing structure with all its inherent richness of age and memory inscribed for you to react against. I realize now that in your work you often create the perception of the existence of ancient contextual incongruities, which, in turn, demand new form, material, or technical responses that are necessarily transformative. This becomes a kind of architectural exquisite corpse where good things of difference become experiential security blankets with puzzling origins, a paradoxical blur at once demanding, critical, and a comforting familiarity to human nature. There are questions now about what is at the core of architecture. I would say the architects have always been at the core of architecture and always will be, if they are willing to bare their soul for it, as you and Enrique have. Where there is no soul, there is no architecture. I think the big question today is, can the architect continue to bring this kind of inscrutable but necessary humanity to our discipline? I think so, but in a world where so many have access to so much and so much is doable, what are the positive sources for authenticity in architecture, where the architect with big, clumsy hands can create delicate lines of inspiring form, or while embracing all the realities of today's world, architects just can see things through their own eyes and make something at once radical and humane.
That was about Enrique Morales and Benedetta Tagliabue.
Now on to the courthouse. The site selected for the new United States Courthouse in Austin, Texas, is one of the most important factors in the design. The new courthouse, let's see, Mack, did you put the pointer here?
Point it out to you.
Oh, I need a pointer for the pointer, sorry. Here. The new courthouse is a 250,000 square foot structure designed for 9 courtrooms and was 12 years in the making. 12 years for Judge Andy Austin for the courts and in conjunction with the General Services Administration. 10 years for the design team, including Mack Scogin Merrill Elam Architects, Page Sutherland and Page, and Architectural Engineers Collaborative, among others. 6 years for Clifford Ross on the team, who was the artist and selected for the Art and Architecture program, and 4 years for White Construction. As you can see here, the site for the courthouse, which I just mentioned, is square in plan, and it abuts to the west side of what is now Republic Square Park. And in 1834, when Austin was declared the capital of the Republic of Texas, this barren landscape was laid out in plats, and 4 parks were made to flank the new Republic capital on access down to the river, a slight downhill slope there. Well, people gathered on the park. This is the park, Republic Square Park. They gathered under the auction oaks, and now imagine that nothing was here. They gathered there and they bid on in auction the plats of land which are now downtown Austin. As you can see with the courthouse, it now resides on the west side of Republic Square Park and consumes a whole square plot. The following is a little animation of sorts that lets you know how the courthouse is configured and why it's configured in the way it is. You see on your left there the square of the courthouse plot, and then the other piece of property, which is San Antonio Street and the park. And these two things are joined together now to make one large site, so that there's a joining together of federal, city, and state properties. At the base of the building is a plinth, which houses restricted parking. As you go up the building, the public spaces are going to be seen in white, and the gray spaces are the courtrooms. On the first floor, you see a courtroom there, which is special proceedings. On the next 2 floors up, floors 1 through 3, house agencies such as the U.S. Marshals, probation, and pretrial. And then on the 4th level, going up the building, you begin to see the configuration of the courtrooms. On each level, there's a magistrate courtroom and a district courtroom. And what you're seeing here is a double-sized volume for these courtrooms, which then allow us to house 2 floors of chambers and office space in conjunction with the full height of the courtrooms. And we call this a rotated and interlocking scheme to just try to give words to how the courthouse is configured. The magistrate courtrooms stack, and so do the district courtrooms, and then we're able to take advantage of that 4-story height for the public lobbies, and on either side on the southwest corner and the northeast corner of the building. And if you're counting, you can see now that we are getting 4, 8, and then 9 courtrooms potentially in this building. So now you can begin to read the public space on the lower levels and the public spaces on the upper level. If we go to the plan, You can now see the logic of the courtrooms on the northeast corner with their adjoining lobby space, and then on the lower level, right below it, one level below, the second pair of courtrooms on the southwest corner of the building, and the adjoining public space, public elevators, magistrate courtroom, district courtroom, jury, witness, attorney, conference rooms. This is a view from the west, and you can see how closely the courthouse is nestled into the fabric of Austin. And you can also see the inscription of the courtrooms on the exterior of the building. And what happens in this scheme, as you saw in the plan, was that by taking advantage of the square site, we were able to place the courtrooms on the outside walls of the building, giving life to the desire of the courts and the judges to always have views and natural light into the courtrooms, and also into all of the other important courts functions, such as the jury deliberation rooms and so on. Another important issue for the courthouse, of course, was the desire on the part of the courts that this be not only a federal presence, but also be a courthouse that was specific to Austin. And what you're seeing in these images is a limestone that's quarried not very far from Austin, and was, again, a very important item for the judges themselves. You see the legibility once again in this material, of the courtrooms, which is a stained stainless steel siding material. You can also, I think, in these images read the idea of these agencies on the lower level and then courtrooms on the 4th, 5th, 6th, and 7th levels marching up the building. It was very important not only just for the judges that there be views and daylight into all of the functional spaces. It was also our major public spaces. It was also an idea that there would be projected to the public a notion of the transparency of our legal system and the connectedness of our legal system to the public, that the public be invited in visually, literally, into this building. This speaks to that same connection to the public. Every Saturday in warm weather, which is a lot in Austin, Texas, there's a farmer's market, and the farmer's market moves right up to the face of the building and takes advantage of that joining together of the two sites. Now, if we return in plan to the lower level of the building, we talked. You'll see here the special proceedings courtroom and the public elevator lobby, the main lobby, the security interface here, the main lobby going over it and connecting with jury assembly, and a little garden space that can be used for the lobby or the jury assembly. So we'll just march up through the building. Here you're looking down that elevator lobby all the way through to the west, and to the right you're seeing the impressive sort of wall that takes you to the into the special proceedings courtroom. Let me back up. The sound lock here is a glass enclosure, which is a real unique aspect to this courthouse. In most courthouses, the sound lock outside of a courtroom will be a tight little enclosed space. Here we had the opportunity to make this a nice transparent glass enclosure. This is a special proceedings courtroom. It's the largest courtroom in the building, and naturalization ceremonies and other really important functions and large-scale functions happen in this room. And just by the way, what you're seeing there, the wood paneling is all pecan. Pecan is the state tree of Texas, so another little local note. In the elevator lobby, you read those first 3 levels where the agencies are, and so they have a kind of public presence to the main floor, and a kind of legibility if you come there to go to one of those agencies, such as a pretrial. Here you can see more clearly those 3 levels and the sort of east-west transparency that goes on all the way through the elevator lobby. On the 4th floor, we began the courtrooms, and again, these courtrooms have this sort of glass enclosure sound lock, and a nice presence looking out at the city here before you turn left into the courtroom. This is the witness attorney conference room. Now we're going into a district courtroom. It's the 2nd largest courtroom size in the building, and there are 4 of them. And as you can see, the pecan again, and the natural light and the views out. From the bench, one can see out, see how the weather's doing and what's happening in Austin. And there's a sort of decorative quality then to the ceiling in these district courtrooms. The courtrooms are joined across this little public lobby, and they are connected level to level by this communicating stair, so that you're not always forced to use an elevator. And the light boxes that you're seeing there are a sort of signal that you're approaching the courtroom. Here you see how, from floor level, how those light boxes work, and I believe in this case we're looking toward Judge Austin's courtroom. And this is Judge Austin's courtroom. He is a magistrate judge, and the magistrate courtrooms are slightly smaller than the district courtrooms, and a little less decorative, particularly in the ceiling area. And again, taking advantage of the pecan. Now I want to go back down to the ground floor. This is the plan of the main floor, the main entry floor. And as we said, the main entry is here with the security interface here. And then the public lobby, the elevator lobby, and the jury assembly, and the garden patio. And what I didn't mention before is that in this scheme, and this took us quite a while to figure this out, because the judges were extremely interested in making a big public space so that events could happen in the courthouse, we had to figure out how we could do that without adding to the program. In other words, there was no money for extra space for these events and so on. So we came upon this schema of incorporating the jury assembly space into the main lobby through the device of these big operable doors. And at the time of the bid of the final design of the building, we didn't have any potential for this wall to be anything other than a rather sort of a generic glass wall with these doors that opened out. And then entered Clifford Ross. And Clifford Ross turned the generic glass wall into a bit of magic. And I'm going to ask Clifford to come tell the story of what he's calling the Austin Wall.
Thanks for that intro. I want to thank Mack and Merrill for including me in, not just today, but I guess into their building. It's amazing that it was 6 years or so. We were guessing at lunch how many, and it seems like a reasonable guess. I thought I would try to give just a bit of a sketch of how this artwork was generated, and keeping to this theme of collaboration. There were many years of planning before I was brought in, and originally obviously the finished building, it had, I think, considerable design work had been done, but there was a good deal more to go. I was invited to be one of many artists to possibly create work for the building, and eventually, for a variety of reasons, was invited to do the artwork in total for the building. When I first started the dialogue, when it was going to be at that level, I began to think about other great commissions, and I tend to think outside of our contemporary times, to look for sources which are going to be sort of throw me off my game and put me onto a new game. What you're seeing here is a portion of a great Palladian villa near Vicenza with frescoes by Veronese. And what struck me when I first saw this was that it was an extraordinary collaboration. The artist had really infused the building with his art, as opposed to putting his art in juxtaposition to the building. I had seen this many years ago, and it always impressed me. And he played a lot of interesting, I'll call them games. You know, the triangular shape above the door is real, and yet the column is trompe-l'oeil. So the idea of integrating art into the architecture and sort of being at the service of the building is something with an enormous historical basis. There was some mention when Mack and Merrill were discussing the building of the, in New York I probably would say pecan, but we'll say pecan because it sounds better. My first idea to follow Veronese and follow Mack and Merrill was to infuse those courtrooms, that pecan wood surface, with imagery of nature. The building is on a park, and it seemed natural to try to bring the park inside. There is a tradition of not putting any artwork in courtrooms, so there was a lot of discussion. While the discussion was going on, I began to develop, this is a small piece, a way of actually printing onto wood. These are 4 by 8 foot panels. And I was very keen to follow this idea through to its conclusion. These are obviously just segments, but we were, as I progressed, I was imagining larger images which could run across surfaces. Interestingly enough, after working for a year or two on this idea, this is Andy, Judge Austin's actual chambers. When I saw the final designs that Mack and Merrill had put together for these courtrooms, I immediately felt that my efforts would have been led to a disaster. I did not think my ideas paid proper homage. They were not going to infuse a great building with something added. They were going to distract from what was already an accomplished space. And it was, it's funny, I don't remember ever viewing this with sadness. To me, it was almost exhilarating to find myself so attracted to the base thing I'd been invited to work with. And I don't remember exactly how it worked out, but more or less, I called up Mack and Merrill and I said, we got to make a change. I think by then I knew Judge Austin well enough to be calling him Andy and saying, Andy, I think we need a change of course. And I flew to Atlanta. I had sent down a whole bunch of images and said to Mack and Merrill, sort of be at play, think openly, I am. The GSA thought it was a good idea to send a camp counselor, and so the GSA sent somebody to be sure that the children didn't get out of control. Unfortunately, that didn't work. Working with Mack and Merrill, That 2 hours was a revelation to me about what collaboration could be and what creativity could be. Mack and Merrill have a way of turning things around, even on axes that you don't know exist. And they do it literally with their architecture, but they do it in terms of their process, which is extraordinary. And as we sort of looked at the building, there was a moment where we saw, I saw this great glass space. It was not drawn quite like this. This is a later drawing, but serves to show you what we looked at. And I think I said something to Merrill like, "What's that?" And the answer was a glass wall. And I think I probably just said, "Well, let's do that." And it was really astounding what happened. Within about 15 minutes, I sort of remember Merrill working away like this with some of the bits of paper. I was at play, Mack was at play. This is 4 by 7 inches of Xeroxed or crudely printed out paper. That little piece of paper became 3.5 tons of stained glass over a course of 4 years. But in Mack and Merrill's offices, that essence of collaboration was present. And it became my job to turn a 4 by 7 inch piece of paper into something that really was a part of Mack and Merrill's building. None of this could have happened without the extended collaboration of both the judiciary, and Andy was by far the most active figure, and somebody that I'll speak about momentarily. So there's, in effect, that little paper collage put into a beautiful rendering of the space that came from Mack and Merrill's office. It was an incredibly absurd thing to think of doing this. How we all ended up doing it, I don't know. I had never done stained glass. I had never worked at this scale. But the connection and the security that I felt within the collaborative process was enormous. The mandate from the judges was, please include an awareness in whatever artwork you make of the landscape that surrounds Austin and is echoed in the park outside. This is a spot I found. This was sort of the first snapshot I took of it, and there were these 2 roads that sort of met in this extraordinarily beautiful area. I scouted for about 2 weeks. This was stitched together from 3 photographs, and I felt there was something iconic about it. The question was how to transform it into an image which could support the structure which Mack and Merrill and I had envisioned for my artwork. So I went back probably 8 months later, 6 months later, after a lot of development, and very carefully captured the same spot. It wasn't as easy as just one handheld camera. It was a 2-week shoot, and I had been guaranteed that in that 2-week period, there were 70% of the days there were cumulus clouds. For the first time in 100 years, there were none. So this was the final high-res capture. I couldn't do anything about the clouds, but steal the clouds from my little study, which we were able to do. I normally don't pull stunts like this, but I felt it was legitimate. I had a reason to do it. We then began to transform, as I had in previous artwork, into black and white and on into negative. I feel in a way you can pay homage to the real world by being a bit oblique about it, and I knew that we wanted to have something effervescent in the central area, but the effervescence I felt needed a very strong base, both in terms of its relation to the real world, but also the idea that it would be simple black and white. This simple flip here is just flipping it 180 degrees, and the reason is that the type of tree that was in my landscape photograph is also in the park. So I very much wanted to have the composition relate to the park outside. Mack and Merrill had positioned their building and designed it in such a way that the exterior is a crucial part of the experience when you're inside the building. Here is a full-scale printout of the idea before it was translated into glass in my studio in New York. So the upper part was always, from that first moment with Mack and Merrill in Atlanta, going to be, as I said, a more effervescent, almost jubilant part. of the composition, and it was born out of a language, a vocabulary I had developed from some earlier work. You'll notice that small square, which is, it was the beginning of breaking down an image from Colorado of Mount Sopris. I tend to look hard at the landscape, and then at a certain point I can never quite do as well as nature, and I go towards abstraction. So the process of heading to abstraction this time involved a tiny little piece of nature. I felt comfortable bringing Colorado into Texas because it's nature, and the issue was bringing nature into the building. There was some discussion about whether or not the judges were going to accept a piece of Colorado in a Texas courtroom, but we got by that. That little piece became the basis of my deploying color to create a liveliness in keeping with how I feel about nature. And then we began to use very complex animation programming to create complex images with that one little bit, that one piece in various colors. The techniques used for this are so, I sort of say, 22nd century, because we're sort of inventing new systems to do it, are very much at odds with the other wing of this project, which was using a 1,000-year-old craft. And the collaboration, which began with Mack and Merrill, extended to Andy Austin, then had to find its way across the Atlantic to Munich. Before I began actually executing stained glass, we tried to explore different kinds of structures based on what we thought would be the final and appropriate mood in that center area, that lobby. These are some of those studies. We made probably over 70. There were big issues of scale and color and rhythm. I believe that's the final study, which we then placed back in one of Mack and Merrill's renderings. And you know, both Mack and Merrill had to be satisfied, which was a very good first step, as well as the judges and the GSA. And so we all took the leap together. In taking the leap together, I knew I wouldn't be leaping away from the group, but with the group. And structural design, I can't stress enough what it meant to be at play with Mack and Merrill and their team and the rest of the folks. What we had to do was figure out, you know, how do we build this massive wall in such a way that we pay respect to the building and don't interfere with the imagery. And this is just a sense of the kinds of things Mack and Merrill were willing to look at as ways of thinking about structure. And it was such an education for me to be thinking in these terms about an image. You know, what is the structure that's going to support the image? This is I think, the final approved study for these massive glass panels. And Mack and Merrill commandeered an amazing array of talent and people. They themselves did something astounding. They created a curved, very beautiful wall so that shadows would not interfere. Then came, in a way, one of the greatest puzzles. How the hell do we turn this concept into stained glass? There was a constant checking in with Mack and Merrill and Andy. The fellow on the right there, and this whole pose is really very much what the project became. How the hell do we do this? That man is named Michael Meyer. He's the 6th generation who running the workshop in Munich, known as Franz Meyer. If not the best in the world, there's none better. And what we had to do was literally reinvent the idea of stained glass. We used both these 1,000-year-old hand painting techniques, multiple firings on the glass, along with very advanced digital work. And it was an extraordinary collaboration. So the circle widened. So there's Mack and Merrill and Andy and the GSA, and then there came Franz Meyer. These are studies of those lower portions. This is an amazing machine. It's certainly not the 1,000-year-old craft. Essentially, it's a digital printer that spits out crushed colored glass. And this infrastructure was put down on the glass and then fired. That it preceded 2 hand paintings. So there was an incredibly labor-intensive process. And so it's sort of amazing to me that this digital dialogue can take place along with something so old-fashioned. And that was a lot of the thrill for me. A lot of hands in the process. People think of the complexity of the image and think computers. When I think about this project, I think about scraping and hands and brushes. It became clear, even though I've been a painter for 20 years, that I was not equipped. I didn't have the knowledge to do the painting myself. So it became part of my job to infuse collaboratively the two painters who were selected by Michael to execute with enormous freedom and abandon, so that their wrists, their sense of enthusiasm and energy would be felt in the paint. And it's ironic because we spent years working on this thing, looking at it from a foot or 2 feet away, and yet you all will be seeing it from hundreds of feet away. But it was, this is a tiny little piece, but we paid attention to all those little details so that when it all came together, which is on the upper portion 2 levels, an articulated etched portion filled with a sienna color, and then a highly saturated color back panel. They come together. We never saw it fully assembled in Munich. We saw it for the first time. I think Mack and Merrill were both there when we saw it in Austin for the first time. And it was quite a surprise. It certainly had bearing on what we'd attempted to do, but it also was very different. Here are what for me are the infamous glass doors sitting in the Austria warehouse where they were fired before shipment. It's interesting, the fellow on the left was pictured earlier. He was the fellow sort of crawling across the glass painting. And these guys cared so much that they were, they followed this all the way through. A quick breeze through the wall itself. It really turned into something beyond what I had imagined. Here's the amazing curved wall. Talk about collaboration. Mack and Merrill and their team came up with a solution that was so sexy and elegant for the problem of how do we deal with the shadows, that it became something that was the equal to the wall. When you go through, you can't help but look up. And you get a quick sense here of what that wall feels like. Here it is with the doors open. It's a very dramatic thing when those massive doors open. It's also quite thrilling because the lobby itself and the architecture is transformed. I really can't believe Mack and Merrill entrusted me with this spot. If I had screwed up, it would have been a very serious problem. I think I would have heard from a lot of folks. I hope that what we did fit Mack and Merrill's vision of the building. In some way, although the audience is public, I think that there are 3 people here in this room who were the critical audience for me. Their thumbs up or thumbs down would have been the indication of what I had accomplished or not. Here's a view of that lobby. And at night, it changes aspect quite dramatically, as you can see. And from the outside, one can see it. This is the view from the park. And the hope that I think we all have is that the wall will help fulfill the original desire of the judges, which Mack and Merrill certainly fulfilled with their design, of making a federal courthouse a place for public enjoyment. Thanks.
Is this on? Can everybody hear me? Great. I just wanted to introduce Judge Andrew Austin, the United States Magistrate Judge for the Western District of Texas. Before being appointed to the bench in 1999, Judge Austin was in private practice and has held several academic positions, including his present role as adjunct at the University of Texas Law School. Wow, that's all I can say after this presentation. 3.5 tons of stained glass, 250,000 square feet, taking up a full city block. Wow, and certainly a successful design project necessitates collaboration. And that word came up about 100 times. So, Judge Austin, I'd like to start with you about the collaborative process and just how fluid was it and how did it all work?
Well, first, let me thank you for letting somebody who doesn't wear black participate in this. You know, I mean, it was a learning experience for me, and that was part of the collaboration, frankly. I was reminded over lunch, Mack invited me early in this collaborative process there was an executive education course at the Harvard Graduate School of Design on courthouses, and asked me to come present with him to this group, and I'm thinking, oh my God, you know, I'm already out of my league talking to these folks about architecture. Now I'm going to be on a panel or make a presentation. And I think he knew what he was doing. I don't know if it was conscious or unconscious.
No idea what
But it led to me doing my own research about courthouses and what a courthouse should look like. Because that was a common thing in this collaboration with the judges, was a lot of people saying, just make sure it looks like a courthouse. And I even found myself saying that. And so I decided that, well, what does that mean? And so looking at some historical courthouses through the 17th, 18th, 19th, or I guess 18th, 19th, and 20th centuries, I learned how different the courthouses were during all that period, and that maybe this didn't really even make any sense to talk about what a courthouse looked like. So that was part of our collaboration, was my own education at Mack's hands. And I think you can see just from the two presentations what an easy group this is to talk to and work with. It's intimidating because all three of them are so knowledgeable and experienced, but they're also incredibly gracious and tolerant and patient with, and those last two, tolerance and patience, very important in dealing with both the GSA and federal judges as clients. So it was a great experience for me. There were other collaborators that you know, the city of Austin really pitched in the sense that they gave us a street. You know, that street between the park and the site. They agreed to close that, and that's it's right downtown. Closing a downtown thoroughfare is kind of a big deal, but it was a unanimous decision of the city council when it went before the council, and that really did enhance the project quite a bit. And then there were some GSA people at the very beginning that I want to at least acknowledge, and I think we all do probably. Ed Feiner was the chief architect of the GSA at the time that this project started, and he was a passionate supporter of great architecture in government architecture, and a big fan of Mack and Merrill. And without Ed's support, I'm not sure we would have gotten this project off the ground. Rob Andrukonis up there was the behind-the-scenes money man who did all of the dirty work of dealing with Congress and getting us money and making sure the project stayed on course. And he was also sort of a very persistent and very supportive collaborator, and he also was very realistic, kept telling us the things we couldn't do, which was important to make this actually happen, to not try to do things that aren't ever going to happen financially. And then we had Susan Harrison, who is the one who brought Clifford to the table, who headed up the committee on art and architecture, and she was the one who ultimately, I think, pressed us to say, look, let Clifford have all the art. He's the right person for this. And so we were convinced by that.
Because it's almost immeasurable. It was the judges that said they wanted light in the courtrooms. Not just the courtrooms, in all of the publicly accessible spaces in the courthouse. It was the judges that said they wanted the courthouse to be about the federal judicial system, but also to be somehow also about Austin and the state of Texas. And it was also the judges that said we wanted this to be an extroverted courthouse that welcomed the public because it belonged to the public. That generated, what Merrill didn't say in the little video, it generated a different solution. It took 2 years to get at it, but it was a different solution than the GSA had seen before in the design of courthouses. It had something to do with the size of the lot itself. It was too small, really. It at first was thought of as too small for a courthouse. It demanded stacking the courtrooms. Without getting into a whole lot of detail, stacking courtrooms vertically in that tight a space with all of the sort of contingent conditions around security control and the way in which the public, prisoners, etc., judges circulate within the courthouse is a very complex set of circumstances, and allow for natural light and this sort of public expression outwardly in the building design. It literally did take a couple of years to figure out. And we had a number of options, but the investment that the judges made in that careful process and the belief that they had that we actually could solve this problem, well, I don't know if they believed it or if they were just demanding it, one or the other. But they were insistent that this actually occurred, and they were insistent that the city of Austin be engaged and the public be engaged in the design of this courthouse. And they were willing to give up the traditional courthouse, the image of the traditional courthouse in order to make this happen. And I think that was extraordinary.
I want to say on that point about the interlocking nature, I don't, you all saw the graphic that Merrill showed of the way the courtrooms articulate. I think we called it the pinwheel concept at one point. That is something, there's been 53 courthouses built under the Design Excellence Program in the last 20 some odd years. This is the first time any architect has figured that out. It's hard to appreciate, even having watched what you watched, the elegance and the complexity of what they did with that. And it's amazing that the solution they came up with that. And it works. I mean, it kept the total shell of the building smaller, and therefore helped allow us to have enough money to clad the whole exterior in limestone, in Texas limestone, and that sort of thing. But it's an amazingly complex solution. None of the other 52 top flight architects had come up with that, had recognized that as a way to do that. So a lot of kudos.
Rewinding the clock for a moment and knowing that there are a lot of architecture students in the room and young architects, can you talk a little bit about the competition for the project and how that was held 13, 14 years ago? So the original competition between, I think there were 6 design teams?
Well, it is interesting. Again, for the architects in the room, this was a 12-hour charrette competition. We were locked into a ballroom in a hotel. There were 6 participants in this charrette. We were given a site that was actually not the site, the site had not been selected, to come up with a design. And it was also a small business set-aside. We would, in my opinion, we would not have been at the table if it hadn't been for those 2 facts. A design competition, small business set-aside. We decided to engage someone in Austin as a part of our team. I think that's also was very important to our approach to this competition. Because we, not having talked with the judges, we had decided that we needed to somehow capture something about the city of Austin. So Larry Speck, who some of you may know, who works for Page, Sutherland Page, a significant architecture firm in Austin, and was an architectural educator. At the time, I think he was still dean at UT Austin.
I think he had just resigned in protest over Herzog de Meuron
Oh, that's right.
being fired from
He
the
got-
Blanton Museum in Austin. That's a whole other story.
True. So it was a little bit daunting context in which we were operating, to say the least. No, but Larry Speck, Merrill, myself, and David Yoakum from our office, it was miserable. It was really horrible. We don't really operate very well under that kind of pressure. We are, I said it's a slow discipline. We are very slow in our process as well. At the end of 12 hours, we didn't have much. In fact, we had very little. It was really embarrassing. I mean, David had gone to the trouble of getting some file. He had brought some, for whatever reason, some paper, and he had kind of clatched together a model, but you couldn't present 3D models, so we unfolded the model and glued that to the boards just to fill up some space. It was really more of a concept than anything else. And if I recall, it had a veranda.
It did?
It did, yes. It had a veranda. We thought that had something to do with Austin. But anyway, the point is that it was a concept. We simply had a concept that was about, I think it struck a chord. It was something that was about its openness, and the idea, the core of the idea was to connect to the city.
And there was a jury for that competition that was not made up of any of the selection committee. It was a peer architect and some others. And
You were on the jury.
I wasn't on the jury.
Oh, you weren't?
The jury
Oh.
scored it independently of us, but then met with us afterwards and gave us sort of the chairman of that jury gave us his grading of the papers, so to speak. And it was, I don't know if you know this or not, but it was like you guys were up here and the other five were. They liked your concept, and and that we didn't really get much in the way of strong concepts. We had sort of preconceived ideas, I think, from the others before the site was seen.
Everybody else had their own rendering people that they brought with them, and they had all these really seriously
watercolors
elaborate. We didn't have watercolor. We didn't even have any water.
We stared at that board with the glued-on paper and. Wow, this is so complex. I can't even get it. I don't know what that is.
Clifford, the creator of the 21st century fresco. I remember you're telling me that you thought it was a prank when you got the call about the job. How did you get your head around the fact that this was in fact a very real project, and where did you find your inspiration?
I still haven't gotten my head around the fact that I was involved with this project. It seems like a sort of an out-of-body experience. The evolution of it was so strange. It literally started with a phone call. Would I be interested in doing something with the GSA? There were so many twists and turns, including a visit which for me was really astounding. I went down to Texas because I had sensed sort of a difference in views between some of the collaborators, we'll say, a desire for vibrancy, to pay attention to the architecture, and also a desire to acknowledge the landscape, perhaps have something realistic. And the read I had was that maybe these differences had not yet found a balance. And I didn't want to step into a project where I knew I'd give my all unless I had a somewhat sturdy ship, I felt, to go alongside me. And frankly, after what was a very good visit in Texas with the judges, and I believe Mack and Merrill were there, and the GSA and folks, Susan Harrison, who was mentioned earlier, was next to me. And I remember, I think I still have a scar on my leg from where she kicked me. But at the end of this lunch, which was unusual in itself, I thought that we all should go look at art together here in New York at the Met and hang out in my studio, and I invited everybody that could to come to New York. And really, Susan kicked me under the, it's like, we don't go there. But in fact, that is what happened, and it was amazing. There were a dozen, maybe more people. We traipsed through the Met, and we looked at Veronese, and we looked at Tiziano and Cézanne, and then we looked at Hudson River Landscape and Pollock and Ellsworth Kelly. And in a way, it became a discussion about the vocabulary of art and the different alternatives which can be deployed by artists. And in this case, it was, as has been talked about, we had a powerful client in the form of federal judges. I had, in my view, I had proximity to fantastic architecture, which I knew would provoke me as much as landscape did, which has always been my center. So there was an amazing unspooling, and it really turned out to be organic. I have no idea why it never dawned on me to be really scared. I probably should have been. There were a lot of very powerful forces at play around me, but the core group, there was such a drive towards excellence to get a product that would be meaningful, a product, such a peculiar word, but there was going to be a building in a great American city, and it had to stand for something, and it had to be used a certain way. And in a way, I was a very important spice, but there were huge elements. The stew was already in existence when I was invited in. And, maybe I was more than a spice. Maybe I was a whole parsnip or something.
Yeah, you were way beyond. You were spice and parsnip.
Yeah, right.
I think the spice were the judges, I think. Yeah.
By the way, Andy Austin's the coolest judge ever. He drives a Cooper. Not only that, a convertible Mini Cooper.
What
And,
color?
and by
what
the
color
way,
is
he
it?
always dresses in black at night. And he was dressed in black at lunch.
Yeah, and I also would point out he, plied me with margaritas when, when necessary.
Right.
That's the secret to this collaboration.
Yeah,
That doesn't leave this building.
I think,
One thing I would like to say about Clifford, like, he did say this in his presentation, but for the architects in the room, to give up the lobby for the artist was a big deal for the architect. And it was interesting working with Clifford. Clifford, we couldn't figure out what the hell Clifford was doing. I mean, we were fascinated by his photographs of waves and landscapes that were focused, right here and focused a mile away or something. And he brought us to his studio in New York, and he showed us this camera that he invented to do this stuff. And we thought, wow, this is going to be really good. We figure out some walls we can put these paintings on, these photographs on. I mean, it was the second time we went, I think it was the second time, all of a sudden he's doing something on wood. He's like etching or photographing on wood. And by that time, we had developed a kind of trust because we were so blown away with his studio and the attention to detail and the rigor, the kind of rigor that he brought to this discipline of art and photography was just incredibly impressive. It had to do with a combination of an understanding of a technology and an amazing eye, just an eye for things.
Architects, go ahead.
Well, it was very architectural. I mean, you're right. I mean, it was easy for us to, once we saw where he worked, once we saw how he understood how he thought, it was easy for us to trust.
And he gained that trust as well with the other judges as well, Judge Yackel and Judge Sparks. And when you listen to Clifford talk for a while, you realize, his understanding and his, and this is true, actually, the attention to detail in the architecture as well, and the not being willing to compromise the quality that no matter what the budget is, we're going to figure out how to do this at the highest level. That, I think, is sort of a common thread among everybody who worked on the project. But Clifford's getting comfortable with the judges was really the other way around, I think, is that he persuaded all of us that same sort of thing. I mean, I don't know what the hell you're doing, but wow, go for it. We just kind of let him go.
Architects, artists, and judges don't always get along, so hats off to you four. And we're so fortunate to have all of you here tonight, and I'd love to open it up to any questions. Yes, in the back. Do we have a mic?
Fantastic building, awesome building. But I heard more than once it was very labor intensive. So my question is, did it come in on budget?
Can I answer that?
Please.
It came.
Please do, Ann.
It came in on time. I think I'm still trying to find this out. I'm sure there's a Freedom of Information Act request I can make. Maybe I can rule on it too. I believe it's under budget. The way that the project's funded and the way the contract was let, I'm not sure that the authorized amount has all been spent yet.
Oh, just 1 second, I'll bring you the microphone.
I guess it never occurred to me that judges pick architects and work on deciding courtrooms. And how did you end up being the person? Because they were lucky to get you.
My colleagues wonder that all the time. Who let him do this? It was just the two district judges. Generally speaking, the district judges would be the ones involved in this sort of a project. Magistrate judges are appointed by the district judges for 8-year terms. I was a young, new magistrate judge at the time, but the two district judges, one of whom is senior status now, the other of whom, Judge Sparks, is eligible for senior status but has not yet taken senior status, didn't expect by the time the project would be done that they would ever be in the building. We have busy dockets, they have busy things. They were busy, and they said, you go deal with this. And that it was just purely that. And then, I always have enjoyed my litigation practice. I enjoyed because it was sort of a general practice. You always had to learn something new with each case. Same thing with this job. So this was an opportunity to do something completely different. So I kind of just dove in head first. Then Judge Lee Yackel was appointed to fill one of the vacancies we had. And for the last 8+ years of the project, or 6+ years of the project, 8 years, he's been involved quite a bit as well. So, but like I said, by the time he got involved, Mack and Merrill had been selected, the site had been selected, we were pretty far along.
You said that you were brought in late into the process, which is not unusual for the artistic endeavors. If you had been brought in earlier, do you think your work would have been different? What you'd finished.
I think if the question, if you didn't hear it, was whether or not my work would have been different if I'd been brought in earlier. I hope I would have been smart enough to wait and see what Mack and Merrill were going to unspool, because there's a chicken and egg thing. And I really believed, it's not like I'm lacking in ego, but the way this thing worked, the first step in the process is what's the building. And it's a call and response. And the first call is Mack and Merrill. And in fact, I heard the call a second time when they finished their designs. I had an instinct originally, and I think if I did one smart thing in the whole thing, it was to be patient and listen and look. The listening and looking had to do with what Mack and Merrill were doing, and it had to do with the judges as well. It also had to do with the landscape. I really spent time absorbing it. So yeah, I hope I would have been as patient to wait to see what that first chess move was. And in fact, Mack and Merrill had played through many chess moves before I made mine.
And actually, of all we were shown a lot of art and architecture finished projects in federal courthouses, these 52 other courthouses, and by far, I think this piece is more art in architecture than any of the other ones. those were sort of art on architecture, I think. This was really pretty integral to the building, as Mack was saying.
We made that glass wall because we knew that Clifford was coming along. Right.
Good palette.
Can I just say one thing? Speaking of collaboration, there are 3 people here in the room tonight that were good enough to come who worked in the courthouse: Michael Patino, Barrett Feldman, Anya Tarowski. Are there any others that I didn't see come in? I'm so happy you're here. I'm sorry John Treffry couldn't be with us, the long, enduring, smart John Treffry.
I'd just like to add to that. The first slide that you probably couldn't see, in a way, we tried to make it where you couldn't read it, was the names of about 350, 60 people that we considered to be sort of frontline collaborators on this project over this period of time. That's a lot of people, but there are a lot more behind that we depended on to build the project, to invent, and to transform their sort of ideas about what architecture could be along the way. How the architect can empower all of those individuals where they feel like that they have a sense of ownership to not just the building and the production of it, but to the ideas of it, I think is a really difficult trick for architects operating today. And I have no idea if we actually accomplished that for 350 people. But what I can speak to is that for the judges and for Clifford, there was a balance that was created. And it didn't matter when you came to the table, in a way, which is really odd, actually. That was a great question, because it never occurred to me. As far as we were concerned, Clifford was always there. But he wasn't, you're right.
You just didn't know it.
I just didn't know it, yes, exactly. No, but it is a great question for architects, artists, anyone working in an integrative field in today's world, which is almost everybody. You know, how do you maintain a sense of ownership, a sense of authorship out of all of that complexity is really quite a challenge for architects now.
Last question in the back.
I have a question for the artist and the judge. Has this project influenced the work you've done since? Because I know you said that you actually used an entirely new process, which was the stained glass process, and you saw how they did it. And has that sort of come back to your paintings and how you look at the techniques and even the scale of the project? And I'm very interested in understanding if, as a judge, it has actually influenced your work in how you do your work, being part of this project, part of this sort of building, sort of making this building for this long and for this long, sort of so many people.
Think about mine. You go first.
Yeah, at a very fundamental level, I think if I hadn't done this project and gotten involved with Mack and Merrill and Andy and others and done stained glass, I'm certain that the next whatever decades I've got left would look differently. I'm actively working with the one very important collaborator who's not here I mentioned is fellow Michael Meyer, who has become sort of another aesthetic brother. And we're working now on new pieces that are freestanding, that are not part of any building, because I've fallen in love with the work in stained glass. I think that beyond that, I think the process taught me a new working method. And although I don't think I've fully integrated it into my day-to-day, this process of collaboration basically blew my own method open. You know, there were things I had to deal with which came from the outside, the forms of the building or the needs of the desires of the judges. And it turned me into a more open artist. If you heard Mack describe my working method, it's strange because it's both extremely rigorous, but it's also fairly, I bounce off the walls before I focus in very tight. And this process has absolutely destroyed any previous notions of how to make art. And I'm rebuilding now, in large part because of my experience with this group.
And to your question about has it changed how I do my job? Well, in a sense, I hope not, because hopefully it's kind of important that I get it right as much as possible, and that I was doing that in the old building where I sat for 13 years. But I don't think I think there's not any way that it couldn't have a positive effect. And I think the thing about architecture is the space, and the way it relates to the people who are there and the people who are working there is very important. But I don't know that we consciously know what it's doing to us. In fact, if it's good architecture, I think we aren't aware that it's the architecture that is having that impact on us. So there's no question but that our views toward our justice system, Judge Yackel's, Judge Sparks and mine, were the three primary people about it's a public process, it should be transparent, it should be open. The building reflects all of that, and there's no doubt that that's going to have a positive impact on the way we work there, but also, this building, our last building that we moved out of was built in 1936, so this will probably be the Austin Courthouse for at least 75 years. So there's going to be a lot of judges after us. And let's just say I love going to work every day now. My office is awesome.
Thank you so much to the four of you and to the 350 people on the team that helped realize this amazing project. And thanks to all of you for coming tonight. Thank you.